Okay, hi guys. So today the issue that's kind of troubling me, the professional problem, is how to deal with warriors. People who are always going to be pessimistic and point out, rightly or wrongly, the thing that could go wrong. And invariably, something that somewhere down the line will go wrong, which kind of validates their opinion on everything not happening. For me, I find it draining, tiring, and it also means that I'm less willing to hear them out, even in the chance they might be right, just because it's always going to go wrong for you. It happens personally, but it definitely happens professionally. And so, I mean, I'll just give you an outline, but I'm sure if you both can take it to the bottom, we can see how bad it can really get when you have a negative Nancy, if that's a negative Nigel, or both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really does create like a toxic kind of environment, a toxic culture where it can kind of spread to others, and it dampens any kind of optimism that you may have for any kind of plans or anything else. It just gets really toxic. It just spreads in that viral kind of way. It can really just be awful, to be honest.
You can end up firefighting these things that aren't ever going to be problems.
Yes.
And then you're spending time doing that instead of doing the normal things like enhancing quality or something. So you're actually worried about something that might never happen. Especially if they're not rated. Like most people aren't good at prioritizing their risk. And that's why you do risk management and you prioritize it. This is high risk, but not very probable. And that is the amount of time that you must have wasted in a business. It could be inordinate.
Yeah, you're completely right. In fact, it's like it's creating problems for you to solve. And you said something there that reminds me of a movie. I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. It talks about his mum was scared of him being sick. He used to give him medicine all the time, and he could never say no because he was never sick. But you're just dousing someone with medicine for no reason, and what's the cost of that? And what does that do to you? And so you're right. It's that. And then the other thing is, it doesn't have to be somebody. It could be anybody. It could be somebody at the same level or lower level or the highest point in the business. If they make it their focus and you can't prove that they're wrong 100% of the time, they're going to keep bringing these problems to you, and you have to keep on almost satisfying them rather than a problem that exists.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really hard to manage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You speak it, you can almost speak it, not to get metaphysical or whatever, but you can almost speak it into existence. And you know how these things go when you are even just on a day-to-day business, day-to-day grind with any work that you do. You have to be optimistic in the sense that what I am doing, I will be able to achieve. I mean, if you have that fundamental principle in mind, then really, what's the point?
Yeah, and once you lose that, especially when you're doing something new and it's not quite formed yet, for me personally, that's the worst thing. You've got something you're trying to achieve that is going to have natural barriers and natural position and natural hurdles, and now suddenly you've got someone adding to those hurdles or outweighing the positivity, and that can affect not just the idea bringer, but also everybody else that has to buy in, because before they've had a chance to see the positive outcome, they're now worried about the negative stuff, and so nobody wants to go outside, and so it's really, really dangerous. I mean, there's a grin there, Charlie. Is that something that you can resonate with?
No, I'm grinning at the irony of the topic and just how far to the bottom we're taking it.
I mean, it is dangerous. It is dangerous. But back to that self-fulfilling prophecy thing, in similar vein, you can find error in almost anything because of the fact that sometimes people's opinions are just different. And so you might still be able to get to the same answer just in different ways, but actually that fight and the way that you do it is always that you can't please everybody. So you could always find fault in something, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's such a huge waste of time.
Is there a final pet peeve before we bring it back to the top then? Another thing that really frustrates.
I do think Charlie hit the nail on the head. It's what it does, the untold damage it does to people around you, and the morale and the culture of the company or the group or the team. You could really stagnate something.
And how do you, just as a final bit, is that you could become so resistant to that person's voice, you could ignore somebody who's actually raising very good flags at points, and that could be dangerous as well. And as you've talked about risk, you need to have your risk in front of you, but you can't get it from a source which you don't want to hear it from, because then it confuses everything. Anyway, what would you start to think of suggestions to try and lessen the damage here?
You know, risk management strategy exists for a reason. It is to show people that we are aware that there's all of these risks. Some of these are going to be catastrophic if they happen, but the likelihood they happen is quite low. Like, who would have thought? Well, lots of people thought there was going to be a pandemic, but we didn't necessarily plan for this. So we wouldn't have put it high up the company's agenda. And I'm surprised if any other companies did. But you know that
if they did.
Yeah, so maybe risk management and showing people, leading them, getting them to understand what's important, what's urgent, that element is where you start with that. But you're dealing with personalities here as well, so you can fix that with a process.
I think as well, in a way that's kind of forward thinking in terms of looking at potential risks, things that can go right, things that can go wrong, likelihoods of things happening. I think it's also good to do a bit of a reviewing process where you look back and you say, okay, well, you might have thought that this was going to go wrong, or you might have thought that that was going to go poorly, but actually here's how it panned out. And yeah, you can take this negative out of it, but actually here's all the ways it went right. And here is past evidence of success that should give you solid evidence of, here's why this future thing would likely work well as well. It's just sorry, go on.
No. I was agreeing to understand what both of you were saying up a little bit, but it occurs to me that both of those need to take place at a certain time. There's a place for when the risk assessment takes place, or the analysis of the risk takes place. If it's just slowing down proceedings and if it becomes draining, because even the idea havers or the positive people only have so much energy and enthusiasm, and so there's not always an opportunity to say at every whim, okay, let's go and fix that. It can be so draining, it just slows down on your aim. So how do you deal with that? There's one thing adding them to the process. If it is a personality and they go outside of the process and just keep bringing you new problems effectively. I used to say to people, don't bring problems, bring solutions. And you try and advise that. Some people are not going to do that. So how do you turn the question back on them when they bring each problem? Say, okay, so what would you do? Is that effective, or is that tiring as well?
Maybe you lean in, but that is tiring to do that every time, especially when you know it's not going to be a huge risk to the company or the group or whatever it is. But perhaps, or I suppose you could have the conversation with them prior to it being released out into the team, so that you then isolate that person, not isolate in a horrible way, but you isolate those feelings, get them to think about it before it hits that public forum.
I do think from that again, and maybe this will split into a different conversation at another date, that it does matter who that person is and where. Because if there isn't a part of a team which is with a staff team, you're not going to get to them first. And it depends where they are in the hierarchy. And so I haven't really named where it is. I've just talked about general negativity. So maybe we'll focus in on where it hits at other points. So for now, if we go like general, what would you give as a good, wholesome way to address it, and what would be a more wacky but still effective way of dealing with a negative culture or a pessimist within the camp?
Well, your extreme could be let them catastrophize, because one day they might be right, and give them that space to catastrophize, and then bring it to you in a specific forum, or when that conversation's happening in a group and it's something you've laid out in a team and it's the first time you're laying it out, let that person have their say, but then shut it down really quickly. Let them know this isn't the track that we're on. We're in the track of going down this route, not catastrophizing about it.
There's something before Charlie says that you said there that reminded me of people. I saw something about how to deal with conspiracy theorists. So if someone says, I don't believe a man landed on a moon, and you go, there's a moon, you believe there's a moon, and you go past them, and then they often have to walk back because you've got...
you one conspiracy.
You out conspiracy to them.
So be out negative.
That might work.
It could work.
That's actually well done for giving yourself a radical solution. That is the solution. Out worry them and see what happens.
It's going to be over in a week. No, it's going to be over today.
But you and I do that when someone's upset, when the other one's upset.
Yeah.
I then do the oh no, everything's fine, and then when I'm upset, you're like no, everything's fine, and then we just seesaw all over the place.
Yeah.
Same thing, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. And Charlie, do you have a final comment as well about how to deal?
I mean, I think we kind of, we've suggested a whole bunch of ideas, and I think this is maybe one that you're less likely to be able to kind of wrap a nice little bow tie on. But I just thinking one possible solution is that I think maybe even giving an element of like ownership over a thing. And yes, that can potentially backfire. But I think when people realize that this is the thing that I've got to pull off, or that I've got to get right, or that I've got to come up with the solutions for, then they're less likely to, you know, the whole negativity thing, it's almost like a washing of the hands, like it's not my responsibility. It is your responsibility. Then, like we were saying before, you some of the solutions. So I think that's a potential way around that. I mean, the personality of the person could still shine through. It'd still be very negative, but I think that's a potential way of mitigating that.
I still think you've hit a nail on the head there, because that's how it comes across. Most negative people, it feels like you're making it somebody else's problem or creating a problem for someone else to fix. So I really identify with your solution there. And I think that probably wraps up in all different types of circumstances, from staff team to senior management, is okay, if that's a problem, whose problem is it? Rather than just telling us like someone else is going to miraculously come in and deal with it. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. And with that, I think that draws it to a close. And till next time. Peace.
Peace.